you're in this beautiful, varied landscape from kind of rolling farmland to begin with to all along the shores of Loch Lomond. And then you kind of start getting through, you go through the moors and you got mountains off in the distance. And it's just beautiful.
What travel adventures have you been thinking about for a while, but just haven't done yet? Haven't had a chance to go and do it yet. I'm excited for today's show because we're talking about one of mine. It's the West Highland Way in Scotland. It's a 96-mile hike. You're going to hear what the experience is like, how to go about doing it, and why you might want to consider doing it yourself, maybe adding it to your bucket list. And of course, we dive into some other topics around travel, why Lynne chose to try to make a living out of travel, how a trip to Europe changed both of our lives, and much more. I also want to share with you this idea of creating a box for your travels and how the West Highland Way, for me, would fit into a certain box and why that could be such a fun way and a rewarding way to design a trip. We'll also give a shout out to somebody in the community here and so much more. It's happening right now. So buckle up, strap in. Thanks for being here and welcome to the Zero to Travel podcast, my friend.
You're listening to the Zero to Travel podcast, where we explore exciting travel-based work, lifestyle, and business opportunities, helping you to achieve your wildest travel dreams. And now your host, world wanderer and travel junkie, Jason Moore.
Hey, what's up? It's Jason with ZeroToTravel.com. Welcome to the show, my friend. Thanks for hanging out, letting me bring a little travel into your ears today. This is the show to help you travel the world on your terms, to fill your life with as much travel as you desire, no matter what your situation or experience. I got a question for you. You know, if you have traveled for a long time, if you've ever gone out on the road, you know, you're kind of forced into minimalism. And being that I spent so many years on the road in my prior life, I never really collected too many things. But there were a couple things that I collected. I'm not a big collector per se, but yes, there were two things that I did enjoy collecting from my travels. One is a magnet collection. And I'm telling you this because I just got my magnets up on my file cabinet thingy that I have on my desk here. And I wish I started my magnet collection a little earlier because I didn't really do that until, I don't know, recent years. But it's still nice to look down and see magnets, you know, from Nepal and Cambodia and here in Norway where I live, and Sweden and Oregon, some places in the United States, Portugal, all these various places that I've traveled over the last few years. And it's just a nice visual reminder of what is out there beyond my little abode here in Norway, where it's winter and we're hunkered down. It's been very cold, but the snow's been beautiful. And speaking of visual reminders, I also am looking at a prayer wheel I got in Nepal and some other assorted nice things that remind me of the world out there, the big, wide, wild world out there. The other thing I did collect pretty religiously since starting to travel, I have no idea why, were patches. I'd like to get a patch from each country, and I'm telling you all this because my stuff just arrived from the United States. I used to have a place in Colorado and got it all down to just 2 boxes of stuff, and in there was my patch collection and my magnet collection. So I don't know, what should I do with those patches? Let me know. Should I sew them on something? Just look at them? I don't know. What do you do with a collection? I don't really know what to do. No, I'm not a good collector, I guess. Anyway, speaking of things that can kind of get your juices flowing when it comes to travel, or just, you know, make you feel good, these are like visual cues and visual reminders that make me remind myself of the power of travel and, you know, how it makes me feel, even though a lot of us aren't traveling right now. I guess I would give you that tip if you have a visual reminder of your travels and you put it front and center somewhere, then you can get a nice feeling each and every day when you see that stuff. And it's nice to look around and see some of these things. And today we're going to give you an audio reminder of travel taking a virtual trip to the West Highland Way with my friend Lynne. I don't know if it's so much of a virtual trip, but just a discussion around the experience of walking the West Highland Way in Scotland, which is something I've wanted to do for quite some time. And, this ties in a bit with this idea of creating a box for your travel adventures or your travel experiences. And I'm going to talk a bit about that principle or that concept after the interview, but I don't want to delay any further because this was a fun conversation with Lynne, who, by the way, congrats to her. She just launched her own podcast called Wander Your Way, and it's all about travels in Europe, and it's wonderful. She's got such a nice voice. So actually, we recorded this show, and afterwards I said, "Oh, that was so fun. Did you ever think about starting your own podcast?" She's like, "Actually, I was just thinking about it." And anyway, so she took action and she ended up doing it, and now it's live. So if you want another podcast to listen to, Wander Your Way is the name of her show. We don't mention it in the interview because it didn't exist at that time, but you can check it out on iTunes, Spotify, blah, 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 wherever you get podcasts. And it's, again, all about travel in Europe. And Lynne's great at sharing specifics around destinations. So anyway, let's slip and slide into this interview, and I will see you on the other side. We'll meet over there. We'll give a shout out to somebody in the community, talk about creating that box for your travel experiences, and a few reflections on this idea of hiking the West Highland Way. So stick around for that, and I'll see you on the other side. I should mention your blog, by the way, wanderyourway.com. Well, not just a blog. I mean, you do travel. You have travel planning services there. I'm talking to Lynne Nieman, by the way. I haven't given you a formal introduction yet. I get into chit chat and then I get carried away. So yeah, you are the founder of Wander Your Way, and we've gotten to know each other over, I'd say, the last couple of years, right? Which has been great as a member of our Location Indie community, and just like I hadn't been on your website in a little bit, and I was just like, wow, you're killing it over here with this website, Lynne. Like, I mean, right on the front cover on the homepage, you had some very compelling messaging there. It was like just this beautiful photo. I'm guessing you took it because you take some amazing photos. And this is like gorgeous mountain scene situation. And I'm thinking, oh man, it would be so great to be there right now. And then I think your tagline on the top said something like, "Do you want to be here? Let me help you go there."
Like, yes, right now everybody's yes.
Yeah. So like, I mean, this is funny. I just wanted to start here because you said, "Do you wish you were here? Let's make it happen," is what you said, because you do travel planning. And I think it's like, it's a certain kind of traveler that's like you and maybe like me, I guess, because I'm here hosting this podcast, that like you love travel so much that it's not just like something you do, it's also something you do for a living. You just like, I want to be around this so much that I'm going to create something that just puts me around it even more than I like to be around. Like, how did travel become such a big part of your life?
Oh, gosh, that's a really good question. I think I remember as a kid, and I'm going to date myself, but I remember like getting the encyclopedias out and just like looking through them and looking at maps and pictures of far off places, and just always like, I just kind of feel like I always kind of had wanderlust in my heart. But, and even though my family were the type that was like, we took summer vacation and we always, tried to go somewhere. I think a couple of times we had to do staycations before staycations were a thing, where we, grew up in the suburbs of Cincinnati. So we would do things close by that were, go to the zoo or go to some nearby, state park or something. So I just think I always just wanted to, I was just curious, I think, by nature. So as I got older, I just kind of started to maybe take little trips. And it was probably really when I moved to Colorado when I was 30, that I just really like, that place just lends itself to just explore. And it was my type of exploring because it was more in the outdoors. I think even though I was maybe not an outdoor person when I was younger, there were woods just across the street and I would always go over there and play. So I think, I just kind of had that curiosity. So I think, that just kind of just kept morphing itself until I finally took that first overseas trip. And I was almost 40 when I did that. and when, so when I went to Europe, when I was 39, because I was bound and determined to get out of the country before I turned 40, that just kind of then opened up even that much more. I had done so much exploring like around Colorado and, Utah and, going to the Grand Canyon, places like that out west that I could get to in a car ride. I went to southern Spain and that was just it. I mean, I just, I went by myself and I just kind of knew that I had to do something with travel. I just had to start to figure it out. And that was 2005. So it was really kind of before, well, maybe that was like when blogging was starting to happen, maybe just a little bit, but it just, all of that. Yeah. And it just kind of eventually morphed itself into Wonder Your Way when I ended up moving back to Cincinnati in 2011, and I wanted to start my own business. And when I finally figured out that I could start a travel planning business because people were inundated by things on the internet, so there was almost too much information, and travel agents were starting to make a little bit of a comeback if they would like get into certain niches or niches. I thought, why not give it a try? What have I got to lose? Because it's not like I needed a whole lot of money to start up. You start a website and you just get some business cards. And of course, then I just had to learn a whole lot of things, but it
make it sound so easy.
I know it wasn't that easy. It still isn't. But yeah, it just, I just kind of started to plan other people's trips, and I just found like it was fun. I loved when people came back and said, "Oh my God, I had such a great time." It just gave me a chance to maybe, just travel vicariously as I was planning their trip, and then when they'd come back and tell me about it. So
we are going to talk about the West Highland Way today, which is a walking trail in Scotland, something that I haven't done, but I know you know quite a bit about it. So we're going to get some tips on that specific destination. Yeah, let's just talk a little bit first before we get into that, because I kind of want to continue this conversation around, taking something you're passionate about and sort of combining it with your business. Because you said, well, it's not that easy, and we were joking around, but in a way it kind of is that easy, right? It's like, all right, first is the decision, giving yourself permission to be like, all right, I love this thing, I want to be around it, what can I do to like create a business around this? And then like, the hard part of maybe learning how to set up a website and things like that, those are like the practical steps. But what's even harder sometimes is just the initial decision and the commitment, right? I mean, once you make the truly make the commitment, then it's like, all right, well, let's figure this out. We have this in common because the solo backpacking trip through Europe thing was the thing that kind of like blew my eyes and my mind wide open and got me like, oh my gosh, this travel thing, like I need to be around it all the time, which kickstarted like 10 years of nomadic life. But, and it sounds like for you, it was kind of like, it sounds like you kind of knew this, like there was maybe going to open you up in a certain way, but like the impact of the actual trip was maybe even more than you even thought it was going to be. Talk about that trip, because that sounds like a pivot point for you to like a whole new sort of career and way of life in some ways. Was that, am I over exaggerating that?
Maybe a little bit. I think I always, even when I moved from Cincinnati to Colorado in the mid 90s, what was it, early 96, I had just finished up photography school. I had just gotten an associate's degree in commercial photography. And I kind of always saw like, I'm just going to travel and photograph. It was kind of that was my plan. I don't know how I was going to earn a living, but I was hoping to be able to earn a living through photography. So I think I kind of always had a little bit of that in mind, but I think what really probably just started to change it was like maybe where I wanted to kind of have more of my travel. And I think when I went to Europe, that just opened my mind more to what it was like to travel internationally and what it was like to be outside of the United States and the connections that you make and how you can be different in so many ways, but yet alike in so many ways, just all those sort of, kind of almost travel cliches in some ways. It's like, I guess maybe it solidified that was something that I knew that I kind of had to do something with travel. And at the time I thought it would be more like my photography, and some writing. I mean, to be honest, like one of my dreams, probably since I graduated undergrad with a political science degree, with a very useful political science degree, was that I wanted to travel the world, photograph it, and write about it, and I wanted to inspire other people to do the same. I mean, that has been like that's been like in my head since I was probably in my early 20s. And it's something that kind of has never changed, but I just think that probably going to Europe really kind of made me fall in love with Europe and travel through there, and then wanting to inspire people to travel to that part of the world. But yeah, I mean, it was something. I mean, I feel like that for me, it's like maybe I always wanted travel to be part of it, but I think it's just kind of the nature of what travel would be part of my life, and to somehow being able to make a living from it. That's definitely shifted. I mean, and how I would do it. But yeah, I mean, it's something that, gosh, I just feel like it has maybe always been a little piece of me. But yeah, that trip definitely kind of, really was it for me. Like I knew that when I came back from that, I was ready to just turn around and jump on a plane and go back.
Yeah.
It's one of those.
Right.
It was like, it's like, this is great. This is awesome. This is what I was meant to do,
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great feeling. It's interesting how these pieces of us will kind of persistently hang around, right? Even if we're doing other things, like trying to have a quote unquote normal life or normal career or something. And it's just like, this sort of nagging, yeah, am I supposed to be helping inspire people to travel in some way? What does that mean? And it's like, I've found in my own life, like just those things that kind of hang around, like probably a good idea to pay attention to them, because when you actually listen to them, then it really opens up quite a lot. And part of that is just like, I think giving yourself permission, right? Like the travel photography example is a great example, I think, of what you're talking about, where it's like, there's a couple buckets, right? It's like, you could be like, oh, I'm going to be a photographer and travel the world. Okay, let me wait for somebody to pick me. I'm going to keep like sending National Geographic my photos or, whatever travel publication, and wait for them to pick me. They're going to find me. I'm a diamond in the rough, right? And then there's like maybe the more practical approach of like, all right, like I want to travel. I want to do photography. Let me create something that allows me to do those things and provides value to other people, and just give myself permission to do that, right? Like I think half the battle is just giving yourself permission to say, hey, this is who I am. This is like this nagging thing that I need to do. All right, like I'm going to embrace this and let me figure out what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there were times like early on when I first moved to Colorado that I was the former. I was like, okay, yeah, they'll find me, the diamond in the rough. I'm going to be that person that, because my dream was, to be a National Geographic. I was, more of a landscape photographer, and over time you're like, yeah, that's not how it's going to happen. I mean, there's so few people that do it. So you have to start creating your own. And so, thankfully I had a pretty good mentor in photography when I was in Colorado, who kind of just helped kind of steer me in the right direction with that part of my life. Yeah, I mean, I think anymore, and in this day and age, there's so much you can create on your own. I mean, there's so many opportunities of people like they can create their own business. I mean, with Location Indie, how many of us come in, and there's so many different people that come in and just kind of take their skills and their passions, and they create these amazing, businesses for themselves, and it's boundless. I mean, it's endless. You just have no idea all the different things that you can kind of create, no matter what your skills or passions or, whatever dictate. So.
Yeah, it's super exciting. I mean, yeah, what you said, I think the quote you said was like, that's not how it's going to happen, when you were talking about trying to, break in or whatever. But, and like, the funny thing is like actually how it happens is how you're doing it right now. Like that is how it happens nowadays, right? Like somebody creates their own stuff, puts it online, and then you get noticed, right? It's kind of like been reversed in some strange ways. But, What do you love about Europe?
I love the mix of history. Full disclosure, I've only been to South America other than, I haven't been to Asia, but I just love how the Europeans are so attached to history. And I'm sure that a lot of the Asian cultures are that way as well. But it just because everything's so old, when they talk about something like World War II, it was like it was yesterday. So they have a great, I think, attachment and appreciation for that and their traditions. It's great to see a lot of that being embraced, but at the same time, there's a lot of natural beauty. And I think that that's kind of the nice thing is like you can go out and, you can hike somewhere or go out on a kayak and you're never really too far from a town. So you can go and have a nice civilized meal. You don't have to go out in the middle of nowhere, which I have done in Colorado and Utah and places like that. I mean, because you lived in Colorado, how it's just like you go out and there's nobody else around, which that's great too. Don't get me wrong. But for somebody who wants to have like that great mix of a trip or lifestyle, I think Europe is great that way.
Yeah.
You can,
no, that's true.
You can go hike like, where I was in the Dolomites last summer, which feels like a lifetime ago now.
Doesn't it though?
It does. I'm like hiking, but there's all these little like huts up there and you can go and you can like get a nice meal. It's Italy after all. But so that's kind of nice.
I think what you just said is a good segue to the West Highland Way because this is one of the allures I think for me as well. This idea of, we both love the outdoor adventure type stuff. I think, and I don't know about you, but it sounds like I love to get out and like do the whole, I'm backpacking, I'm in the middle of the wilderness, I'm dirty, like I haven't showered overnight thing, or multi-night thing or whatever. But like nowadays, what I also love is like the idea of doing something like that, but then combining it with like a little reward at the end. And maybe it's like, like my latest fixation is to do this longer distance cycling type thing in France where you like cycle along the canals, but then like you can stop in the villages and eat. It's like I just added this whole thing to my bucket list. But the West Highland Way, I feel like is slotted into that category, right? Because like you get to experience wilderness and hiking and like this mix of nature, but then the history of places and like small towns and villages and warm meals, dare I say warm meals, and cold pints of beer and things like
and good whiskey.
And good whiskey, right? Like, this is like, this all sounds so great. So like, this is definitely something that's been on my bucket list as well. Correct me if I'm wrong with that description, but I guess just describe for people what the West Highland Way is and your experience with it.
So the West Highland Way it's 96 miles long. It runs from just north of Glasgow, from a town called Mulgai. It looks like it's Milngavie, but it's Mulgai. And it goes up to Fort William. So it's on the western part of Scotland, and it gets into like the last few days are the days where you're actually like in kind of what would be considered the Highlands. Varied terrain, no like hiking up a tall mountain or anything like that. There's not really a whole lot of those in Scotland anyway. So it's kind of more of a rolling type of trail, I would say. A lot of time by Loch Lomond, which is one of the larger lakes there. And you come into either towns or settlements along the way, where you can, there's even places where you can stop, like that end up being partway along the trail that you could stop and have lunch if you wanted. So it's, you're in this beautiful, varied landscape, from kind of rolling farmland to begin with to all along the shores of Loch Lomond. And then you kind of start getting through, you go through the moors and you got mountains off in the distance, and it's just beautiful. And to be honest, when I kind of found out about it, I had been thinking about doing some other long distance trails. And when I found out about it, and I had never been to Scotland, I was like, that's it. That's the long distance trail I want to go to. And I had been in Ireland and I went over to Scotland. I, set everything up in advance, but that was my introduction to Scotland. Like I didn't go, I flew into the Glasgow airport. I got it. I had a ride arranged to go up to Mulgai and went up and then started walking. And that's how I first saw Scotland, which I think was a great way to do it. I mean, it was just, yeah.
You can choose the ways you travel, right? Like in this case, you're like, all right, I'm going to land in Scotland. I'm going to choose to explore Scotland by walking this particular area. But just walking as a means of travel is like a different travel experience than, training around or flying around. What do you like about walking as a travel experience?
Well, I just, it slows you down. I mean, and I guess, part of that I think also is the photographer in me. It's like I hated being like my first trip over to Europe when I was in Spain. I took the public transportation, which in that part of Spain was mostly buses. And I'd be on the bus and I'd be like pointing out the window going, I want to photograph that, when there's still can't tell the bus.
Like, stop the bus. Stop the bus.
Come
on.
There were so many times where I wanted to scream that, stop the bus. I need to take a picture. Oddly enough, on that trip, I did the one place that I was staying. I met an older couple. He was Italian and she was French. They were married. They were an older couple and they had a car. And so they were going to go explore the coast one day. And they're like, you can join us if you want. And he was like, he had a camera too. So he's like, just tell me if you want to stop and take a picture, I'll stop. And I was like, okay, this is great. So walking.
And you were like, do you have any idea what you just invited in?
I was straining myself. Trust me.
4,000 stops later, get out of the car. No.
I know. So anyway, I think for me, like walking, that's just it. It's like, and I had to, like, I was worried walking the West Highland Way because it's like, you got so many miles, and it's like, I even though it's like, I walk at a pretty good pace, I'm in decent shape. So it's like, but I was like, so worried. I'm like, Lynne, you cannot stop every like 5 steps and take a picture because I tend to do that. So, I just think it's such a great way to just, like I said, slow down. And the interesting thing is, when I walked it, which was early May, number one, I had perfect weather, which doesn't happen in that part of Scotland very often. But, I think there might have been one day where the Scots maybe had a holiday. So I was meeting like a lot of Scottish, that were just out like on a day hike because, you can pick up access to different parts of the trail, right? So people would be out and you'd stop and they'd be like, oh, you're walking the whole thing. Good on you, and they were just like, so it was just such a nice
Good on you, lassie.
Don't start with don't start with those accents, Jason.
I won't. I'm sorry. I
apologize. Your Irish accent.
I hang my head in shame.
So that was like really, really nice to be able to just kind of, stop and you'd meet Scottish people and they were just, so nice. And there were a few that were like walking the whole thing as well that I met. So,
and that takes roughly how long? Like, I know you can do it at like various, speeds, of course, but.
Well, if you're a young Kiwi and you're running it, you can do it in 3 days. Oh, yeah. So I met some guy, he was running. He's like, oh, I'm running it. And I'm like, I looked at him like, what?
Yeah. Sounds like, fun, not?
3. It's like running like 3 marathons, right? Day after day. Most people, I think the average is 7. I met people that were obviously I met somebody that was doing it in 3. I remember the first day I met a group of guys who were doing it in 5. The Gazelles, they were 2 Kiwi women. They were doing it in 6.
Do people have trail nicknames like that?
Yeah, there's a few people.
What was yours?
I thought, you know what? I just asked my Scottish friend that I met on the trail. I was like, did I have a nickname? He goes, you were just the American lass.
So my accent was correct. Yeah.
So
that's great.
Or the blogger. Well, once he knew who I was, then I was like the blogger. So because they found out about that, but but yeah, so, I met some people that were doing it 8 days. And, interestingly enough, I remember meeting an older couple and they were doing it in like 10 days. And I was like, that's great because, they were older. They could really take their time. They still were out there doing it. And I was like, good on you, that you're, still going out there and you're tackling something like that just at a slower pace and that. So I did it in 7 days, which meant that the lengths vary every day. I think my shortest day was probably 9 miles and the longest was about close to 19. The 19 and day 5 for me was the 19 mile. And then the next day was the 9 mile, which was kind of nice, to kind of have that long day and then kind of have the next day be shorter. I think it's a doable trail for people of all sorts. Like there were some people I thought there's no way, like on day 1, I was like, there's no way they're walking the whole trail. They were walking the whole trail.
Really?
And then,
well, let's talk about, the whole experience. Like, I imagine there's several ways to do it. I mean, you could camp the whole time. You could mix camping and accommodations. You could say like it's modular in that way as a traveler, right? It's like you can kind of tailor the experience for like, I mean, you can only know so much how you're going to feel, 3 days from now or whatever. But you might think, okay, well, I'll camp this 2 nights, and then the third night I'll be ready for a shower and a hot meal, so I'll stay in this town or whatever. Like, can you talk about just like, I guess I just want to hear your advice on the planning process and how somebody should approach, like if they're like, I want to do this West Highland Way thing, like this sounds cool, like Lynne did it, like just flying to Scotland, and the first thing I do is walk this 96-mile trail and start experiencing Scotland, on foot. Like, how should people kind of plan ahead for that?
Well, I think the first thing is just kind of know yourself. That would be the first piece of advice. I mean, if you're not a camper, don't try to camp. If you're a person that wants to stay, have a bed and have everything planned out, plan everything out. If you're a person that wants to fly by the seat of your pants, you can. So I'll tell you how I did it, and then I'll talk about the other ways. So I actually decided, even though I'm a travel planner, I went with an outfitter, basically, that kind of sets everything up for you. And once I made the decision to do it in 7 days, I knew that, number one, I wasn't going to carry all my crap with me every day, and I wasn't going to camp. Because obviously, like I had been traveling over in Ireland for the month before, so I had a decent sized bag. I'm not going to hike with that.
Well, this is like an important point, I think, because logistically speaking, I know a lot of people in the audience too, like when they're traveling, usually probably just not flying in for this trail and then leaving. You're probably going to other places, or maybe you're living overseas and you're coming, you got a lot of stuff with you. So it's good to know these options, right?
Right. So you can have your quote unquote, what I called my big bag, transferred. And most of the long distance trails will do this. I mean, the West Highland Way is no different. Obviously, things like the Camino de Santiago and things like that, you can do that. So that way, you're just taking what you need for the day. You have your day
pack, and then you give somebody your big backpack with all of your stuff, and they just drive it to the next location.
They drive it to the next location. So, and usually every accommodation that you stay in, they'll be like, put your bag here, put your bag there. They'll have a lobby area. Some of them have a shed out back. Put your bag there, and then the transporter guys come and pick it up and then take it to, it's tagged. Like you get some sort of like tagging on it so that they know where it goes. So that kind of takes that out of your mind. Like you're like, I don't have to worry about it. So you just kind of so you can pull out your dry clothes, and, you've got clean clothes to wear the next day. You don't have to wear the same thing every day if you've got, some choices. And, that's how I did it, and just then walked with my day pack every day. The other thing is I had my outfitter called Walker's Ways, which is just kind of, it's a small operation, unlike some of the bigger one like Max Adventure. And she set up all of my accommodation along the way. So I told her what I wanted to stay in. I didn't, I don't like hostels or bunk houses because I'm a light sleeper and I don't like sleeping in the same room with other people. That's just me. It costs a little bit more to do it that way. So, that just depends on your style.
I mean, I know cost can change obviously, but like generally speaking, what did it cost to have so you had accommodations every night and you had your bag transported and things like that. Do you remember
I
what the whole thing
think
cost?
so. I'm going to probably have to quote you in British pounds since that's what I paid in. I think it was maybe about like in the 550 pound range, and that was a few years ago. The one thing I will note is that I did have like a pre-night, so I did go and I stayed, in the town of Mulgai where I was going to start the night before, and then I stayed an extra night at the end in Fort William because
Oh, yeah.
I wanted
I
to
mean,
take.
that's not too bad considering like you're sleeping indoors every night
And most of the places, I will tell you that most of the places, the place I stayed at the end was actually one of the nicest places. But most of the places were, they were fine. They were like little B&Bs or guest houses. Depending on how you're stopping. Some of the places, like my second stop, like the first stop was, well, okay, I don't want to. I'm kind of going off topic. So let's stay with your other choices then for actually staying or for setting up how logistically how you would do it is on the first day, I met a German girl who had all of her stuff on her back and she was just going to come into the town and she was going to try to find a place to stay. She had like a book that had different places to stay. And she would either try to call them or if they were like nearby, she could just kind of walk up. But I think she was calling. So that's another way you can do it.
But is that difficult during high season? I would imagine.
Yes.
Yeah. You kind of have to plan on not getting a place, I would imagine, right? And just camping out. Like you could pay nothing and camp out every night and just pay for the food you cook, right? I mean,
exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, and it's like I met another guy. Okay, so somebody else with a nickname. I called him Grocery Bag Guy. He was this
shout out to Grocery Bag Guy.
He was this big, tall. I think he was German, and he was camping out. But seriously, like he had those, your reusable cloth grocery bags. He must have had about 4 of those things. He had a big backpack on, and he carried those things as well. So he had all of the stuff that he needed with him, all of his food and everything, and he was camping out. And power to him for, going all the way through. Of course, his, load got lighter as he went along, as he ate his food. But I mean, there were people that you can camp out. There are so many different ways that you can do it that are to your taste. My friend Andy, the guy that I met along the road, I think had planned everything out, but he was staying more in the bunkhouses.
Mm-hmm. This is obviously a popular, well-known trail. I'm sure there are less popular, like less people type of trails you can take in Scotland, of course. There's a lot of hiking there. So I think sometimes people wonder, like, is it worth it, right? Like, would I be better suited to what makes this so iconic and worthwhile, even though you're going to be dealing with maybe more travelers and harder to find a place to stay, maybe a bit more expensive because these towns are along the route, so they know people are passing through.
Yeah, but I still don't think the places are to me, when you look at the rates, really, they weren't charging that much. I think you just have to plan. I think you have to plan it out to not go during the high season. I mean, when I went in early May, it was, there were times where I was walking by myself. There wasn't anybody else around me. So I don't think that, now that might be different now because I do feel like, with COVID, people are looking to do more outdoor stuff. But I do think that if you kind of pick that more shoulder season and not go in obviously July and August are the worst. And you don't want to go, actually, you don't want to go. Here's a tip. You don't want to go then anyway because of the little midgy bugs that are they're real small and they're just annoying. I don't know that they bite, but they're just annoying. They can get up your pants and all that kind of stuff. So it's because they're real little. But if you go in May, it's too early for them. And if you wait till maybe September, then they've kind of died off.
Okay. So you're looking at the shoulder season, April, May, September, October.
April's probably too early, just because some stuff there may be some places that aren't completely open.
Okay.
But usually, from what I understand, the 1st of May is kind of the beginning of the season. I would say things probably still are open, but I am guessing that, you might just be risking a little bit more. Maybe the weather not being quite as cooperative.
Okay. And as far as finding your way? Like, I think sometimes that can be intimidating for people. Like, what if I get lost in the wilderness? And is it pretty easy to, for like the sort of the outdoorsy person, like the person that's not orienteering and they've got a map and a compass and they know exactly how to figure out where they are in the middle of nowhere, Bear Grylls style. I mean, is it fairly simple to stay on the trail and not get lost and not die?
It's pretty well marked. It really is. And, the thing of it is, like, the way I did it and having an outfitter too, because I was, obviously being a solo traveler and being, a female traveler, it was nice because I knew that, like, if I didn't show up at a place, if something had happened to me, that they would know, like, like the people where I was staying, they'd be like, they could call, the outfitter that I use and say, hey, Lynne Nieman didn't show up. And, plus I just also had a phone number, and you got self-service in a lot of places, but yeah, so you're not really totally in the middle of nowhere. So, it really is pretty well marked. There are a few spots that maybe get a little confusing, but if you can there's a great guidebook, by this guy, Terry Marsh. I think this is I got this as part of my, my package, and it's just called Walking the West Highland Way. So,
I'm so ready. I'm so ready to walk it. I mean,
yeah.
Sounds...
It's not overly busy, I mean, I'm sure it is at certain times. And like I said, I mean, I ran into locals in places, that were just doing part of it. Certainly, like, I remember at the weekend, like on Saturday was the day that I walked my 19 miles. And, I did see more people. I mean, even though there were a lot of times I was walking by myself, but I did see people out, like, kind of, doing just part of it, on those days, because the weather was so nice too.
Can you share like one or two of your favorite memories from the walk and the whole experience? Because it's really a whole experience, right?
Yeah. One of the overarching things that I want to kind of say about kind of like walking one of these long distance trails, whether you're by yourself or even with other people, I think it's at once kind of, both meditative. You can be on your own and get very reflective. And at the same time, it can be very social. Like, you can, meet other travelers. It's pretty easy because you're all kind of in this together. So you're sharing stories about your blisters or, over that section of the trail or whatever. So it's kind of like that nice, you get that nice mix. As far as some of my favorite stories, so the story about when I met my friend Andy on the trail, which was at the end of day 3. Yeah, it was the end of day 3. And, I think I had seen him. He passed me at one point about halfway through the trail, and I had stopped to photograph, and he just kind of made a comment to me about it. Get any nice photos? And I was like, oh yeah, whatever. And then I came upon him and an Englishman a little bit further up, like close to where I was going to be stopping, and I had to go across the lake. This was kind of at the north end of Loch Lomond, and where I was staying, I had to, like, there's like a little boat that comes over and gets you and then takes you across the lake to this little settlement called Ardlui. And you have to find this like pole, and there was a buoy. And I kept going, well, where's the, I'm like, where is this buoy? I was just kind of still looking around because, I knew it was going to be around somewhere. And he said, you mean boy? He called it a boy. So we got into an argument. I'm like, it's buoy, it's boy, So just he's from Glasgow, so he's got a very Glasgow region. Sometimes he was talking to me and I'm like, you need to repeat yourself. I said, I have no idea what you're saying, because that's British accent was so thick. And so it was just kind of a joke. And I could tell because he was kind of smirking at me, and I'm like, oh, I think I'm going to like this guy because he's just funny.
Yeah, it's great that you're describing the mix of, getting solitude if you want it, getting the interaction with other travelers, but also getting to meet locals along the way too. I mean, how was the food? Did you have some pretty epic meals in some of these towns, or not so much?
The food was decent. I mean, there were some places that probably had some better stuff than others.
Yeah.
I definitely always treated myself though to some whiskey.
Yeah. You earned that at the end of the day, right?
Yeah. I mean, I was really kind of like trying to.
Do you like the super campfire, like Lafroig type of Scotch whiskey, or
smoky peaty stuff? I think I like Speyside whiskeys a little bit better, which are kind of not so smoky and peaty. But there's a time and a place, I think, for a smoky peaty whiskey.
The campfire in the bottle, not your jam.
No, it's campfire. It's the earth.
That is awesome. No, I appreciate you sharing your experience around walking the West Highland Way. I mean, certainly something, that I've been wanting to do for a while. I know I'm going to do it. Like, I'm here in Norway. I'm not that far away, right?
No.
Just need to block out the time. And no, I really appreciate it. Before we kind of let you go, I wanted to ask you about travel intuition, using your travel intuition, because that's something you talk about with your travel planning services, and something you talk about on your website, which, by the way, we should let everybody know. Just again, it's wanderyourway.com. So if you want Lynne's help in planning some travel, she can help you out with that. And I mean, you can share what else you do as well. Just wanted to get your thoughts on travel intuition.
Yeah, I kind of think that sometimes if we plan out too much stuff, we don't leave ourselves open to just kind of following your nose, if you will, and just kind of, opening up your mind and your heart and your soul to just letting anything happen. So if you come across a situation where, maybe a local is like, hey, you need to go here, or let me show you this, some people immediately put up their guard, I think, and they're, oh no, I got to stick to this plan. I have this plan. I got to do this. Well, but what does your gut tell you? What does that intuition tell you? Would that be an opportunity that you think would be something that would, lead to this really great travel moment, as I call them? So, kind of listen to your intuition, listen to your gut as you travel. Don't have to be so packed on a schedule, and, say yes, say yes to those travel moments, those times where some opportunity just presents itself, even if that means you have to kind of throw some other plans out the window, because sometimes, then something really magical happens, and you have that experience that you're like, that's going to be one of your like favorite travel memories ever.
Yeah. Love it. Think about your hierarchy of values as a traveler, right? It's like if like a local invites you to go stay with them at some town like 3 towns away, and you want to go to this site, it's like, well, are you here to meet the locals, or are you here to see these sites? Which do you kind of, you want to have that adventure, that experience of like sort of the unknown, or maybe a place you didn't plan on going. I mean, I love what you just said. So I'm right on board with you there. I hope we get to hang out in person one of these days.
Norway's on my list, so.
Yes, I know, because you're coming over to Europe. It'll happen at some point.
Or we can go walk the West Highland Way, or there's the Speyside Way that's up at north that goes to all the distillery places.
Yeah, that sounds good. I should mention there was a website, westhighlandway.org, that has some information on the trail as well. I just feel lucky that I get to have you in my circle of friends.
I feel the same. I
really appreciate who you are, what you do. It took too long probably to get you on the podcast to share some of your travel philosophy, and of course we handpicked like one of these sort of adventures that you've had, but I mean, you have other guidebooks and things on your site. So if you go to wanderyourway.com, you can check out what Lynne's up to and see some of her amazing photography, read her articles, and get a little wanderlusty, I guess.
Yeah,
if you need that.
Armchair travel.
Keep doing awesome stuff and inspiring people to travel. Thanks for taking the time to do that for us today.
Hey, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
All right, take care.
You too.
There you have it, my friend. Thank you once again to Lynne for stopping by the show. That was fun. Don't forget to check out her podcast, Wander Your Way. It's live now, where you can get podcasts. And I very much enjoyed our chat and getting to kind of vicariously travel the West Highland Way. I mean, this is a spectacular little chunk of the world. Sounds to me anyway. And true story, I actually once did a hitchhiking race in Scotland. It was pretty crazy. We camped out, did some wild camping outside of Edinburgh. A friend of mine, Gary, organized it, and we all woke up, and we had a crazy party, and then we all woke up the next day and teamed up into teams of 2. We had to hit, I believe it was 8 or 12 checkpoints around Scotland and get our picture taken next to them, and it was all in good fun, and it was making our way around the entire country. So I teamed up with Gary, and half of the teams went clockwise, the other half went counterclockwise. We ended up meeting some teams in the middle. And man, I remember that hopping in that first ride and getting the driver to honk his horn while we waved everybody off who was still standing at the side of the road. And what a blast. What an experience. If you do want to hear about that experience, I have a show in the archives that's all about it, a bit of a narrative show, which it can only capture the experience so much. But you can imagine some of the characters we met and the kindness that we experienced on the road. Just people, took us in for meals. One woman drove out of her way. She did her normal commute that she would do to her job, but she did it on a Sunday just to give us a ride, even though she wasn't even going in that direction. Another older couple drove us like an hour out of their way just so we could get a picture in one spot. Just incredibly kind people, such good warm vibes from the people in Scotland, and the land just kind of raw and gorgeous. So West Highland Way, very high on my bucket list. And it also fits into this idea of creating a box for your travels, which I'll talk about in a second. I do want to remind you, if you haven't signed up over at zerototravel.com yet, what are you waiting for? Come on, join us over there. If you like the content here on the podcast, you can keep in touch with the weekly newsletter, and we have other things going on online, like workshops and challenges to help you build a side hustle if that's something you're interested in. So we have all these different ways that you can travel, and Zero to Travel, I like to think of it as an a la carte menu for whatever works for you, right? It's travel on your terms. That's part of what I talk about on this show. This is a community-powered show. This show's for you, and that's why I try to just mix up the guests here so everybody gets a little bit of everything. Maybe you don't want to start a business to travel, or maybe you do. Maybe you care to work remotely, maybe you don't. Maybe you want to get a travel job. So that's why you see all of these different topics being covered. And of course, I want to cover any other topics that you want to hear. So you can get in touch anytime, jason@zerototravel.com. But just go and sign up for the email list over at zerototravel.com. And that way we can stay in touch and you won't miss anything going on off the podcast and online. Now, let's talk about this idea of creating this box. You heard me talk about it a bit in the interview. One thing that I discovered recently was these bike trips that you could take on these canals in France. And this box that I'm imagining, if you're talking about creating a box for your adventures, is a bit of this outdoor adventure meets sort of village, city culture life, right? In a foreign destination. So this idea of getting out, sweating, doing something out in nature, doing something physical, and then just rolling into a town and I won't say getting pampered, but maybe having a nice hot shower, a good meal, something that's I guess a little bit indoors and relaxing, so you get to experience the culture, the life in a small town or small village, but you have the in-between times where you get to be out in nature and doing something physical with your body, which of course has its own culture, but maybe, depending on the adventure, you might not be seeing as many people. And this is a box that I like to think of it as a little box, right? It's like this idea of, hey, let's go on this adventure, and here's what the box contains. Here are the elements of the box. You've got this physical aspect, and then you've got this sort of in-town, kind of like small town, staying in nice places and enjoying that side of travel aspect, right? So you can kind of earn it. In the in-between stages, you're sweating, maybe you're doing something physical, and then you earn a bit of a reward. You earn your meal at the end of the day, and it's just a nice balance, I feel. And that's an example of creating a bit of a box, right? So I like this idea of with the West Highland Way, when you think about a 96-mile trail, like that is the box, right? There's the trail, there are the miles, and the experience contains those elements I just discussed in the physical challenge, the mental challenge, but also earning your Scotch whiskey at the end of the day, sweating, getting dirty, and then maybe getting clean and sitting in a nice pub and hanging out with some Scottish people. That's a nice little box. I like that. And you can create these boxes for yourself when you pick these adventures. One of the adventures that was on my bucket list for a long time was going to Nepal. And then there was an uprising. There was like a communist rebellion. And anyway, this was years ago. And for many years, I couldn't go. And then I did end up eventually going. And the box was the trek, right? The trek itself. So sometimes these adventures where it's like a set number of miles or a set number of kilometers, and you can make up your own, right? That's why I wanted to bring up this concept. It doesn't have to be a well-known thing. You can say, well, I'm going to ride my bike from whatever, Florida to Alabama. I'm just making that up. There's my box. And within that box, what's the experience going to look like? How am I going to craft it? Now, of course, you don't know what's going to happen, but you can set yourself up for a bit of an idea of what the whole experience will be like. And it doesn't mean you have to travel like that the whole time, but you're creating a little box for these adventures. So anyway, I like this idea of just creating this little box. And these are my favorite boxes right now, that when I'm fantasizing about travel again, I'm thinking about this idea of the physical, and then getting the cultural elements of small town life and things like that. And that's why the canal biking thing in France appeals to me, and the West Highland Way, and some of these other hiking trails in Europe where you can, hike through the Alps and then you end up in small towns and things like that. It's just cool. What's your box? What's an idea that you have, or what's a box that you might want to create or live in for a little mini travel experience? Let me know. And in fact, we can make that a call to action for the audio message request of the week. I've been asking for audio messages from people in the community. If you can send me one via email, jason@zerototravel.com, or if you go to zerototravel.com/speak, that will take you to a page where you can record an audio message. And really, I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to put your voice on the podcast. Let me know, what kind of box would you make? What do you think about this concept? Do you have another concept that you want to share as it relates to travel with the community? Any thoughts, questions, suggestions? Hit me up. And nothing I love more than getting audio messages and then being able to play them here on the podcast so you can hear from other people in the community besides me. But I do thank you for taking the time to hear from me and listen to this show. Much appreciated. And it's time to let you go now, right? You got to get about your day. Let me reach into the quote drawer here, see what I can come up with as far as a good quote to leave you with. Here, this is a random one I pulled out. In any language, can you say anything higher in the sentient kingdom than I love you and thank you? That's from Muji. Probably not pronouncing that name correctly, but pretty beautiful quote. Nice thing. So I'm going to say I love you and thank you to you, my friend, and have a wonderful day. Till next time, take care. Cheers.
This podcast has been brought to you by zerototravel.com. Ideas and advice to make your travel dreams a reality.